Καλώς ορίσατε, καλημέρα και καλησπέρα σε όλους. Χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ και χρόνια πολλά για την ημέρα που είναι. Σήμερα είναι η 25η Μαρτίου, διπλή γιορτή, όπως λέγαμε και στις γιορτές στην Ελλάδα, η μέρα του Ευαγγελισμού, αλλά επίσης και η μέρα της ελληνικής ανεξαρτησίας. Α, Είναι η μέρα στην οποία ξεκινάει η Ελληνική Επανάσταση. Χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ ως πρόεδρος του Κέντρου Ελληνικών Σπουδών του Πανεπιστημίου του Σικάγο να καλωσορίσω το εκλεκτό μας ακροατήριο, φίλους του κέντρου οι οποίοι έρχονται και ξαναέρχονται και συμμετέχουν στις εκδηλώσεις μας. But let me just switch to English right now because I realize that, we'll have to do that in English. But I wanted to say a few things in Greek given the day. So I wanted to welcome our audience, which has been faithful and participates to all these events. Today it is the double celebration of the Annunciation, as well as the beginning of the Greek Revolution, a revolution that led to the sovereignty of Greece and to the creation of the Hellenic Republic eventually in 1830, which celebrates today then its 204 years. That's a long time. I also wanted to welcome our distinguished speaker, Mr. George Manginis from the Benaki Museum. Calliope will present him and talk about his distinguished activities and what he's going to present to us today. I wanted to say just a few things about the center. The center was created in 2019. And since then has been building. We were very happy to acquire a position. We were gifted a position last year on modern Greek language and culture. And this is the beginning of creating a full program of modern Greek. Currently, the center has affiliated faculty that teaches, in addition to the modern Greek language, also many topics on Hellenic civilization. Ranging from philosophy, classics, in the classics, of course, classical Greek literature, but also medieval and Byzantine literature. We also have faculty in the Divinity School that does Byzantine art, faculty in the political science, and many other areas in humanistic study and social sciences that engage with Hellenic studies. And our goal is to build a bigger program. Part of our goal is also to collaborate with institutions in Greece and bring about and showcase, so to speak, the great work that is being done there for the preservation of our cultural heritage and the engagement with everything that Greek civilization has to offer. And so today's event is in the spirit of this. I would be remiss if I didn't say just a few things about why the 25η Μαρτίου is a significant day, and then I will let Mr. Manginis talk more about this. I wanted to say that the Greek Revolution is very important. It's a landmark date for all of Greeks living in Greece and outside of Greece. It is the day that marks Greek sovereignty, as I said. It is the day that Greeks begin their struggle against foreign rule in many ways. It is the beginning of anti-colonial struggle in Europe. We can view the struggle of Greeks as in the spirit of anti-colonial rule. And it is no accident that after about 1 year into the struggle, the Greeks wrote to the president of the newly formed nation of Haiti, στην Haiti, which was, they had performed their own anti-colonial struggle and freed themselves from the colonial rule of the French. And the Greek revolutionaries saw what was happening in Haiti as a sister struggle. And that tells us a lot about what was at stake for them. So it is very important to remember that, to remember the fights for freedom, the sacrifices, and that were done. And so in that spirit, I want to let now Kalliopi continue with the presentation of our speaker today. Thank you all for being here. Ζήτω 25 Μαρτίου. Okay.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, Αναστασία. Αγαπητοί φίλοι, dear friends, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. We are absolutely delighted that you could join us today for this special event. We are deeply honored to host today's distinguished speaker, Dr. George Manginis, the academic director of the Benaki Museum, for a fascinating lecture on the landmark exhibition 1821 Before and After. This event is held in celebration of Greek Independence Day. Please allow me to mention a few things about our speaker. Since 2001, Dr. Manginis has been teaching history of Byzantine, Islamic, and Chinese art at SOAS, University of London, the Courtauld Institute, and the University of Edinburgh, among other institutions. In 2013, he was a Stanley Seeger Fellow at Princeton University. He has participated in archaeological excavations in Greece, Cyprus, and the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, and has worked as curator, archivist, and museum development consultant. He has published numerous scholarly articles, as well as, I was impressed, Georgi, 5 books, one of the most recent being the one on the George Evmorphopoulos collection. I also want to take a moment to say how grateful we are for your presence today. We are genuinely humbled by the overwhelming response this event has received. Your enthusiasm affirms just how deeply this remarkable period of Greek history continues to inspire and resonate with audiences around the world. Following the lecture, we will have a Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your questions via our webinar's chat. I also have to mention that this webinar is being recorded. And finally, although she could not be with us today due to her demanding schedule, Her Excellency Ekaterini Nasika, the Ambassador of Greece to the United States, has graciously shared a video message with us. We truly appreciate her gesture, and I will now play her message. Once again, καλώς ήρθατε, welcome. We are thrilled you could be here, and we hope you enjoy this thoroughly engaging journey through history and art.
Today, Greek Independence Day. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, distinguished guests, it is with great pleasure that I address you today, Greek Independence Day, a most defining day in the history of modern Greece. A lecture by Dr. George Manginis, a renowned scholar and academic advisor of the Benaki Museum, is a most enlightening way to mark the day. First, allow me to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the University of Chicago's Center for Hellenic Studies for organizing this significant event. The partnership of Center and the Benaki Museum is a testament to the enduring value of cross-cultural dialogue and scholarship. This lecture is particularly meaningful precisely because it takes place on the anniversary of March 25th, 1821, when the Greek people rose up to claim independence after centuries of domination by the powerful Ottoman Empire. It is a day of reflection, pride, and celebration of the courage and sacrifices made by those who, against all odds, fought for and won the freedom we can enjoy today. This lecture is, of course, inspired by the exhibition 1821 Before and After, one of the most significant ever curated by the Benaki Museum. This exhibition offered a truly profound and multifaceted exploration of Greece's revolutionary past, and it not only commemorated the Greek War of Independence, but also shed light on the cultural and national transformations that followed and shaped Greece into the free and democratic nation it is today. We are fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from Dr. George Manginis, whose expertise and passion for Greek history are immense. His contributions to the preservation and understanding of Greece's cultural heritage have been invaluable, and his insights on the 1821 Before and After exhibition are crucial to understanding the history of Greek independence and the nation's development and evolution. Dr. Manginis, thank you for offering your time and expertise, and I'm confident that today's lecture will provide a deeper understanding not only of the exhibition, but also of the significant historical moments it highlights. Once again, my deepest congratulations to all those involved in organizing this event. Your dedication to promoting Greek history and culture is deeply appreciated. Χρόνια πολλά σε όλους. Σας ευχαριστώ και είμαστε όλοι τυχεροί να γιορτάζουμε την 25η Μαρτίου με την παρουσία του κυρίου Μαγκίνη.
Thank you very much. That was very touching. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Είναι πάρα πολύ καλή. Dr. Mangini, ναι. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Share.
Thank you very much, Dr. Giannakidou and Zuru, and it was wonderful to hear the message of Her Excellency. I will now share my screen and we can begin. Can you see the screen all right? Fine, thank you. So, Χρόνια πολλά, and many thanks for joining me this afternoon, it's evening in Greece, for pondering on, going over the legacy of the Greek Revolution, and doing it through reminiscing and bringing back to life an exhibition that the Benaki Museum organized in 2021 on the occasion of the bicentenary of the revolution. The exhibition was a major event. It was probably the largest one we have, as the Benaki, have mounted in the last 25 years. And it was generally perceived as the most important cultural event to mark the anniversary. So let me now, yes, begin. For those of you who are not familiar with the Benaki Museum, I would like to first take 5 minutes to introduce you to the museum, its history, but most importantly, its work. The Benaki Museum bears the name of its founder, Mr. Adonis Benakis, who was born in Alexandria, Egypt, in the late 19th century. He came from a very distinguished family of Greek expatriates who made a lot of money and distinguished themselves in cotton trading, Egyptian cotton trading. Adonis, the scion of the family, was a natural-born collector, and he created a fascinating collection, mostly of Islamic art, but also, being a Greek patriot, of early modern Greek art as well. So in the family started getting much more involved in Greek life in the 1910s, and in the 1920s, Adonis moved to Greece between 26 and 27. And when his father died in 1929, he decided to donate the family house, which is a grand neoclassical mansion across the street from the National Garden of Athens, to the Greek nation and fill it with his spectacular collections. The museum was founded by law in 1930. It is the only museum in Greece operating as a non-profit foundation, but the collection is the national collection, and it opened its gates to the public in 1931. The collection is very broad and extends from Greek antiquities, a field in which Benaki was not particularly active as a collector, but many other Greek collectors have bequeathed the fruits of their collecting labors to the museum. So we do have a spectacular collection of Greek antiquities. I'm just showing here a few items of Hellenistic gold, probably one of the finest collections of Hellenistic gold in the world is housed at the Benaki. And right now, for those of you who will join us in Athens until May, there is a beautiful exhibition dedicated to that period of Greek gold working. But also there is fantastic Byzantine art, including two of the three earliest works by Dominikos Theotokopoulos, the famous El Greco, and perhaps the most important collection of early modern Greek art, what we used to term as folk art, encompassing metalwork, costume, embroidery, weaving, woodwork, ceramics from the 16th to the early 20th century. The collection of Byzantine and post-Byzantine art is, of course, complemented with wonderful objects brought back by the refugees from Asia Minor in 1922 and 23 and entrusted, among other institutions, to the Benaki Museum. And this is the famous epitaphios of the Spinetta of Constantinople, one of the treasures of the museum. I mentioned already that Benakis was a collector of Islamic art, and there is a separate building dedicated to the art of the Islamic world, the Museum of Islamic Art, which is now undergoing refurbishment. So hopefully within about a year from now, we will be able to welcome you to the renewed museum, which has one of the finest collections in the Western world. However, in the late 20th and early 21st century, the Benaki expanded not just in size in different buildings, but also in holdings, and now encompasses the most complete collection of 20th century material, including two major estates by two important Greek artists, one by Nikos Hadjikyriakos Gika, the celebrated painter, and another by Yannis Papas, the most important post-war, 1930s and post-war Greek sculptor in the country. And that's not just it. For example, the Benaki runs the first scholarly fellowship center in Greece at the beautiful Patrick and Joan Lee Fermor House in Kardamili in southwest Peloponnese, where scholars from all over the world can apply and spend 5 wonderful weeks working on a project. In total, the museum runs right now 9 buildings open to the public, not just the Museum of Greek Culture, or the Gika Gallery, or the Papa Studio, or the Museum of Islamic Art, or the Lee Thermal Center, but also a silk manufactory, a museum dedicated to toys, the Valadoros collection, and of course, the one most people associate with exhibitions at the Benaki, the grand building at Piraeus 138. And it is in this huge building, which features 3,000 square meters of space, where the exhibition marking the bicentenary of the Greek Revolution was organized. The Benaki Museum, I'm very proud to say, is the most international museum in the country. We have loaned objects, sent exhibitions, and worked with institutions, museums, universities, and foundations in all the countries marked in blue on the world map. This map will soon become even bluer because we're working now with India, and I hope we will include also more African countries in the near future. Now, why would the Benaki organize an exhibition on 1821 and the Greek Revolution? As I already mentioned, Benakis, our founder, as a Greek patriot, was very interested in early modern Greece. And he had started, after the World War II, to collect very actively archives. It was a time then that the last granddaughters and grandsons of the fighters and of the people involved in the War of Independence were dying. And that generation was, they were the last people that had a direct contact with the revolution, and their archives, their family archives, were becoming available. And Benakis was very active in collecting these archives and bringing them to the museum. So we do have one of the most complete archives housed at the historical archives of the museum on the Greek Revolution. In addition, there is a wonderful collection of Philhellenic art and of objects and memorabilia connected to the period of the revolution, from roughly the 1800 to 1840. And as I said, also, there is this very good collection of material from the 16th to the 19th century, which can frame the whole narrative. So we wanted, for many years, we were planning to do something very special. But the opportunity really arose 5 years before 2021. It all started in 2016, when we were approached by the cultural annexes, the cultural departments of 3 major banks. The Bank of Greece, which is the bank that issues, used to issue the drachma and now issues euros. So it's the publishing bank of the country, the central bank, but also the National Bank of Greece, the oldest bank in the country, and Alpha Bank. All these 3 banking institutions have a commitment to culture, house wonderful collections, including a lot of works of art that refer to the revolution, have themselves fascinating archives on the period, and have worked in the past very harmoniously with us in various exhibitions and publications. So it was a natural match, the 3 major banks connected to Greek culture and history, to work with the Benaki. Together, the 4 of us, the 4 organizations, co-organized and produced this exhibition. The original title of the exhibition shows its ambition. If you notice, it says 1770 to 1870, Greeks and Greece, revolution and state. The two historians that curated the exhibition, Drs. Tassos Sakelaropoulos and Maria Dimitriadou, who are responsible for the historical archives of the museum, did not just want to cover the 9 years of the revolution between 1821 and 1830. They wanted to start the story, the telling of the story, about 50 years before 1770, when the first armed revolt happened in the Greek world, and that is the Orlov revolt. And their ambition was to extend the narrative down to 1870, 100 years later, when, by which stage, 40 years after the independence, the Greek state reaches a kind of maturity and can stand on its 2 feet and move towards the future. So, and the title embodied that. However, wonderful as it is, it wasn't brief enough. And we all know from marketing experience that a title has to be snappy and hit the right tone. The problem with the original title is it didn't have 1821 in the title. So we changed it and we put 1821 central in the center and then said before and after. How long before? It doesn't matter. How long after? Really doesn't matter either. But it was to give the idea that this is going to be the story of the revolution, but also we're going to cover what came before and after that. And it was our graphics designer, Dora Piccioni, who suggested doing this. And we experimented with various formats for the logo of the exhibition. And then we decided that we had to do something quite simple. And we ended up with the logo that you see at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. And that was used throughout the material and all the visual identity of the exhibition. This was the poster, which was actually very well received and very popular to this day. Now, this photograph is about 2 years before the scheduled exhibition opening. We had said that we will open on the 4th of March, 2021. That was the programmed date. So we are now in 2019. And the people in the photograph are the 5 most important people. The 2 people seated with their backs to us are the exhibition curators, Tassos and Maria, I already mentioned. The people seated at the window are Natalia Boura and Pavlos Thanopoulos, the exhibition designers. Natalia is an architect, Pavlos is a scenographer. They are the people that would take the list of objects and the text of the curators and produce a space for us to move through. And the lady pointing at the screen is the chairman of the museum, Irini Geroulan. And the meeting was to actually choose the colors for the 3 parts of the exhibition. This was a mega exhibition extending across 3,000 square meters. That's over 30,000 square feet. It's vast, and it would be in 3 sections. The first part would be what happened before the revolution, the second part, what happened during, and the third, what happened after that. And we wanted to choose colors that would correspond to the feeling of these 3 different periods. So the first part, called Hellenism and Ottoman rule, was dominated by a very striking red color, a deep red, bringing to mind, of course, the imperial state of the Greek world under the Ottomans. By the way, you'll see that this rather beautiful Cretan embroidery is dancing on your screen. This is part of an augmented reality application that we had designed for people to use in the exhibition. And we ended up with these very charming little videos, playful videos, and I'm using them throughout. You will see some of the images will be moving around as I speak. The second section, the one on the revolution, was called Revolution and Its Heroes, and it traced what happened between 1821 and 1830. While the last section of the exhibition, the biggest one, was called Greeks and the State, and it examined the remarkable steps taken to turn Greece, which happened for the first time in 1830. There was never before in history a state called Greece, alas, into a modern state by the 1870s. And then the pandemic happened. Exactly 5 years ago, you may wish to forget it, but we couldn't, about a year before the kickoff of the exhibition, as we were all getting prepared, as we had started planning the catalog, designing the catalog, as we were ordering the walls and the colors and the labels, and finalizing the loan contracts with all the different institutions that would bring us objects, everything ground to a halt. The world just stopped. Now, on the one hand, that was a challenge because, for example, for a few months, we couldn't even approach the museum. It was completely closed. And after the whole thing relaxed a little bit in summer 2020, there was a limit to how many people could congregate together, and meetings were not possible. And then there was a second lockdown in the winter of 2020-21. So we had to set up the exhibition with under very strict controls. That was the negative part, but there was a positive part. Everything stopped, so all the other exhibitions that we had planned had unfortunately to be postponed. And we decided that although we postponed every other project, the 1821 project would go on. We had no idea when and if the exhibition would open, but we brought everything to fruition, and amazingly, by the 4th of March 2021, the exhibition was ready. It was ready, but like a sleeping beauty, it could not open to the public. The museums in Greece opened to the public the 14th of May 2021. So for more than 2 months, the exhibition just lay there. We could go and see it. We could put, finishing touches, perhaps, a little few things that we hadn't, done perfectly, but the audience could not be admitted. Finally, of course, other things had to happen, okay? I have to say that the moving all the objects in this exhibition, it featured 1,200 objects, this exhibition. So to move all of that under pandemic rules was a major feat, but I'm just going to show you 2 photographs from moving the largest work of art we featured. And this was the painting by Benaki of the troops of Karaiskakis disembarking on Phaleron in 1827. This work of art is part of the collection of the Bank of Greece, and it sits on the 6th floor of the huge building of the bank opposite the University of Athens, in central Athens. And it's so big, the painting, and so heavy, that it cannot come through the staircase or on a lift. So it had to be moved by crane. So that at 6 o'clock in the morning, the day that it was moved, streets in the center of Athens had to be closed. And this huge crane had to lift the packed painting and bring it down on a truck. And then with armed escort, take it to the Benaki to go up on the wall. So such was one, I mean, probably the most spectacular move we did for the exhibition. Finally, on the 14th of May, we opened our gates and welcomed people. And I'm going very quickly to take you through the different sections of the exhibition and the things covered, just highlighting a few important works from each section. As I said, the first section of the exhibition was dedicated to Hellenism in the period of Ottoman rule. And we wanted in this section to bring to life the everyday lives of Greeks, also other communities living with Greeks at the time, Armenians, Jews, Turks, within the multinational empire, but also to talk about the institutions that allowed the Greeks to emancipate themselves and to formulate a national identity and the wish for liberty. And that wish brought us to the revolution. So the first section was, of course, explaining how the Ottoman Empire functioned, what was its administration, and how the Greeks contributed to this administration. And here I'm showing you a miniature of a fanariot of a Greek living near the court of the Sultan in Constantinople and contributing to the running of the empire. There was a section on travelers who, mostly from Western Europe, who came down to Greece and described the lives of the Greeks, but also discovered the important cultural monuments and elements that this small group of people was proud to have given to humanity. Daily life was the biggest section in this first part of the exhibition. And here we created tableaux vivants, as they're called, sort of setups that evoked the lives of people. So here, for example, there is a bedroom with a beautiful bed from Rhodes, a fantastic costume from Carpathos, and a small collection of things connected with everyday life and childhood. There was a reconstruction of a banquet in Chryso, a small town near Delphi in central Greece. And also a few costumes with strong Western influences, showing the contact of the most sophisticated and well-traveled Greeks, the traders, with the West, as well as, of course, the islands in the Ionian Sea, which had never been Ottoman and lived under Italian rule. And there were a lot of images, a lot of materials to bring to life, to give you a flavor of everyday life. The role of traders, commerce, and the different guilds was highlighted. These were the institutions, the bodies in which Greeks were predominant, very energetic and powerful, and also allowed them to move around Europe, learn languages, and read books. The books in the 18th century connected with the European Enlightenment. And we had amazing material from the historical archives, like, for example, treaties and documents giving special privileges to Greek traders to operate around the Mediterranean. The need to educate these traders, to give them the languages and the knowledge to operate in an expanded world, was the one that pushed educational foundations, libraries, schools, higher schools, targeted for a Greek audience. We all hear about Krifos Scholiou, the hidden school of the Ottoman period, but that is a myth. This never happened. Actually, during the Ottoman period, there were a lot of high-profile educational institutions all over the Greek world that taught children to read, write, and speak languages. The church also performed a very important role strengthening the identity and the sense of continuity of Greeks, but also preserving language and also the customs within a multinational, very complex society as was the Ottoman one. 1770, as we mentioned, was the kickoff point for the exhibition. And this was the year when a Russian agent, Count Orlov, connected to Catherine the Great, came down to Greece and stirred a revolt in the Peloponnese and Crete. This revolt, the Russians abandoned the Greeks to the wrath of the Ottomans. There was extended slaughter. And although this first uprising was a failure, it kind of sowed the seed for a revolution. And this seed was watered by important figures who, with their example, their writings, their teachings, gave it the opportunity to sprout and blossom. And of course, the most famous of them was Rigas Velestinlis, Rigas Phereos, as we also know him. Now, this particular piece of jewelry is very touching because it belonged to the wife of Ali Pasha of Ioannina. Not Kira Frosini, she was the one who drowned, but Kira Vasiliki, the lucky one, who lived to a good, ripe old age. And there was a special section on Ali Pasha, the Albanian warlord, because his difficult relationship with the Sultan's court gave the opportunity in 1821 to the first stirrings of the Greek Revolution. He kept, let's say, the Ottoman administration busy. And the people that were able to take up arms and start a war were the Armatoli, basically mercenaries working for either the Ottoman government or not, and the Klefts, who were bandits, brigands, so to say. And of course, people moved from one role to the other. They either worked with the Ottoman government or against it, depending on the way they were swayed. However, the institution that really prepared systematically and very consciously the revolution in the late 1810s was the Filiki Eteria, the Society of Friends. And this, again from the historical archives of the museum, is a document, a codified document. It's written in code, and it needs a very special knowledge in order to read it, to translate it. And this document would be used to identify members of this secret society to one another. So there were various parts of the Filiki Eteria in Russia, in Austria, in the Ottoman Empire, and they communicated between them, and they identified the members one to the other through these special documents or through these rings. This is a sort of secret ring that would identify one as a member. And we reach 1821 and the second part of the exhibition. And this is the one everybody expected. This is the section that we learn about in our history books, we read about when we are at school. And it's full of legendary figures for Greeks, but the exhibition also had to work for non-Greeks. And I always kept on saying, you know, we have to explain 1821 to someone from Indonesia. We have to make someone from Brazil understand what was the importance of that. And I think we succeeded. So this section was structured in three different ways. The first part was chronological. It covered year after year from between 1821 and 1829, the 9 years that led to Greek independence. 1821, the revolution begins, amazingly, in what is today Romania, the north frontier of the Ottoman world. And it fails there, and then it just moves into the Peloponnese and is reignited in spring 1821. The murder, the execution of the patriarch in Constantinople is one of the most tragic events that follow this. Of course, we have to realize that the patriarch was not just a religious, but also a political leader for the Greek community, and someone had to pay for what had happened. But the Greeks were not daunted, even when in 1822, a hugely symbolic act, a crime of important proportions was perpetrated by the Ottoman Empire, and this is the massacre of Chios, of a whole of the population of a whole island, as an example to what the Greeks would suffer if they continued. But continue they did. This is a copy of the famous painting by Eugène Delacroix, which hangs in the Louvre. We could not get this work, but we got two more that I'm going to show you now. However, very often we talk about the great works of art and the beautiful paintings and objects in an exhibition. Sometimes it's just a piece of paper that makes all the difference. This piece of paper from February 1822 is the abolition of slavery by the temporary Greek government in all Greek lands. Nobody in Greece could be a slave, not a man, not a woman, of any color, of any origin. So it is a deeply touching document which shows how progressive, how advanced the Greeks were in 1822, decades before slavery was abolished in other civilized nations. I mentioned Delacroix, and we were able to borrow from the Louvre, not, of course, the massacre of Chios, which we couldn't fit in the museum, it's such a big painting, but two wonderful studies by Delacroix. And they arrived with special security, of course. This one shows, I guess, two French models wearing Greek clothes that had arrived in Paris at the studio of Delacroix, and you can see they don't know how to dance Greek dances because it's all wrong, but they are very charming and beautifully painted. And this is a pair of slippers painted twice, one from the front and one from the back, and they were perhaps the finest paintings we had in the exhibition. 1823, the war continues at sea. This is the flag of Hydra, and we highlighted figures like Madame Mavrogenous, the heroine of the Greek war, who gave everything for freedom. 1824, the first major constitution, the Constitution of Epidavros, is voted, but also Psara, another island, is torched to the ground by the Ottoman fleet. 1825, a major turn to the worst. The Egyptian general Ibrahim, the son of Muhammad Ali of Egypt, arrives, and he fights with Papaflessas in Peloponnese, and things are very, very difficult. In 1826, Messolongi, for years besieged by the Ottoman army, falls. There's a heroic exodus, and amazingly, this tragic event is the one that turns the tide, because it engenders such emotion in the West that makes 1827 a rather more positive year for the war. This is a better photograph of the great Volanakis painting from the Bank of Greece, which we saw being airlifted to the museum. And this is an English cartoon showing the Greeks on the left being very thankful towards the British, the Russians, and the French after the Battle of Navarino. So you see, the Greeks, there is a lady, a man, and a little child, the British sailors in the middle, a red-haired Russian sailor in green, and a very funny French sailor are saying, "You're welcome," because the Battle of Navarino is the one that turns the tide. And from now on, it's a question of time to reach 1830. And in the Conference of London, Greece becomes independent. The second part of this section of the exhibition was a heroine, was a special marbleized, looking like a marble monument dedicated to the figures of the revolution. People like Karaiskakis, whom we just saw, and here it wasn't dark anymore. It wasn't gray, it wasn't gunpowder gray like the war was, but it was flooded in light. And across the heroes was this beautiful wallpaper printed in 1827 in France and depicting the major battles of the war, the major episodes of the War of Independence. One of the most beautiful items at the Benaki. Even today, you can see it on the third floor of the museum. So here we commemorated and we celebrated the lives and the careers of people like Kolokotronis. And this small icon was dedicated by Kolokotronis to a church. Makrigiannis, here depicted by Yannis Papas, the famous Greek sculptor. Marcos Botsaris, this is his waistcoat. It is tiny. When you hold it in your hands, you realize that these people were not very tall and not really big. They were wiry, small people, but tough. And Bubulina, and here we used AR to reconstruct what you would have seen through her spine glass aboard her ship. Dionysios Solomos, he wasn't a fighter, but Solomos, a Greek, Italian-speaking Greek living in Zakynthos, used his pen, which proved mightier than the sword, and of course created the hymn to liberty, which became the Greek national anthem. The war was not just fought by Greeks. A lot of Europeans and Americans joined in the effort, and they were also celebrated. the Philhellenic movement was examined. And this is a beautiful ticket from a lottery in Switzerland in the 1820s. And if you know French, you'll see within the laurel wreath in the center, it reads, Aux Grecs les beaux-arts reconnaissants, to the Greeks, the fine arts in gratitude, in recognition of their contribution. And what this lottery ticket says is that, you know, a Swiss lady or gentleman bought it, gave a few francs to help the cause of the Greeks, because the Greeks did so much to art and culture. The most famous Philhellene was, of course, Lord Byron. And we had a special section dedicated to him, a small shrine on the great poet who, as you know, died in Missolonghi. And we were able to borrow from the British Embassy in Athens the most beautiful portrait of Byron, in which he wears the clothes of an Albanian man. This portrait is not usually accessible to the general public, and it was the first time that it was exhibited in many decades to the public. The second section on the revolution ended with a small room on Ioannis Kapodistrias, the first governor of Greece. Kapodistrias was a major player in European and world politics because he had been the co-minister of foreign affairs of the Russian Tsar. And he had been immortalized as one of the people who beat Napoleon in this beautiful portrait, which sadly we were not able to bring for the exhibition from the royal collection in Windsor. And this is perhaps personally my favorite object in the exhibition, because it wasn't an original, it was a beautifully done facsimile made in Madrid by the Factum Foundation, who specialize in very high quality copies of works of art, and loaned and eventually gifted to the museum by Lord Jacob Rothschild on the occasion of the 200 years of the Revolution. So we were able to share with our public this beautiful work of art using modern technology. And that is the lovely section that we dedicated to Kapodistrias. But we all know how Kapodistrias ended. He was murdered, and Greeks were then assigned a king, King Otto, the first king of Greece. So the third section of the exhibition examined the period from the arrival of King Otto to Nafplion, his first capital, until the reign of George I, the second king of Greece. Otto was very young when he was made king of Greece. He was just 17. By the time he arrives, he's an 18-year-old young man, and he is enthusiastically welcomed in Nafplion. One of the most impressive paintings in the exhibition was a copy by a Greek artist of the famous German painting of the arrival of King Otto. And in this painting, there was this detail that I was particularly enamored with. It shows a company of elegant, pretty girls perched on a building and looking down on the handsome young king arriving from Germany. He was Bavarian. And among these girls, you can see there's a black girl. Now, it was one of my particular joys going through the exhibition and the huge visual record of the period that it had gathered and finding people of different nationalities. Armenians, as I mentioned already, Jews, but also Black people, who were most of them liberated slaves, who had worked in Ottoman ships, but also Ottoman households, and had found in this modern, progressive Greek state a home and liberty. So here we have a posse of young girls, including a young Black girl. Otto soon moves his capital from Nafplion to Athens, and we reconstructed one of the gates of ancient Athens. This is just a set in order to frame another beautiful painting showing his arrival to Athens, to the Agora of ancient Athens. He sets up to build the palace, which is today the Parliament building in central Athens, and marries his beautiful young queen, another German, Amalia, who creates the national costume that girls still wear in parades for the 25th of March. They're dressed as Amalias. This is one of the earliest photographs of the court of King Otto. And we see ladies in waiting to Queen Amalia. And you see they are dressed in either European dress or Greek traditional dress, each one from the island or the part of Greece where she originates from. So when we set up the section on the court of King Otto, we looked at prints of how the interiors in the palace would have looked in the 1840s, and we used original costume from the museum collection to give you that feeling of being at a ball in the palace, surrounded by the new royals and the court, but also the fighters of the War of Independence that were being celebrated. A lot of work has to be done in order to make Greece a modern state. Infrastructure has to be created, an army, a trained, proper, disciplined army has to be set up. And of course, the Greek church becomes independent from the patriarchate, autocephalous, as the word is. Educational institutions are being created. A university is being set up, which will eventually be the University of Athens. King Otto, here shown in mature age, wearing the Greek traditional dress, also introduces a coin, the drachma, and founds the National Bank of Greece, and the paper he's holding is actually the foundation law of the National Bank. Otto, at the beginning, rules as an autocrat. There is no constitution to abide with, and he just rules by God's law. But the Greeks won't have it. So there is a revolution, and in 1844, there is a constitution that all kings will have to follow in years to come. And we had one of the handwritten copies of the Constitution in the exhibition, as well as the table on which it was signed and the pen with which the king signed it. And this is a very nice popular print showing the uprising. At the time of Otto, the great idea, the Μεγάλη Ιδέα, was created. It was the idea that, of course, the Greek kingdom was tiny at the time, so more Greeks lived outside Greece than within. And actually, the richest and the best educated Greeks lived in what was still the Ottoman Empire, in Asia Minor, in North Greece. So the idea was created that actually these lands populated by Greeks will have to be incorporated. Greece will have to grow and will have to fight the Ottoman Empire to expand its borders. So the great idea was not that great, as we will see, but it took another exhibition in 2022 to discover what would become of it. That's another story, another lecture. And here, for example, is the fateful decision of the Greeks to join the Crimean War on the wrong side of their major allies, the French and the British. Otto, despite the constitution, is an unpopular king, and he is ousted in the 1860s, and we see him here wiping a tear with his fustanella as he boards a ship, a British ship, and he's taken back to Germany with a very distraught Amalia. Now, during the period of Otto, many things happen. And one of the most touching parts of the exhibition had to do with the slow demise of the first generation of fighters, of the great heroes who fought the War of Independence. And this is the announcement by the family of Kolokotronis of the death of Theodoros Kolokotronis. Adonis Benakis, the founder of the museum, had collected in a folder all these public announcements of the deaths of the great people, of the great fighters of independence. And we dedicated, the curators of the exhibition put up a special section to this, and it was a particularly touching place to see their medals. And these 4 pieces of paper that were so important because they proved how much gratitude was extended towards these people, who many of whom stayed quite humble after independence. It was also the period, the 1840s and 50s, when a whole universe of symbols and ideas was created around the revolution. And this is a beautiful painting from the early 20th century by Gysis, by Nikolaos Gysis, showing glory walking on Psara after the poem by Dionysios Solomos. This painting was in a private collection until 2021. It was given to the presidency of the Republic, and the then president, Katerina Sakellaropoulou, loaned it to the exhibition so that the Greek public could see it. So we were particularly proud to have this famous painting in the exhibition. But also a much better known painting by Theodoros Vrizakis showing an imaginary moment, the declaration of, the beginning of the revolution in March 1821 at Agia Lavra, the monastery. Never happened, but it was a very strong picture that there was one kickoff point for the revolution. Greece needed a new capital and needed new, strong, and live and powerful cities. So Athens, Piraeus, Patra also featured in the exhibition. This is one of the first urban plans of Athens, one that was never materialized. Athens, we know all, is a maze of a city, not a very easy city to live in or to drive around. If the architects of the 1830s and 40s had been listened to, it would have been different. So we had a whole section on all these imaginary Athenses that never materialized. And of course, on the monuments and all the effort to ground the new state into antique ancient Greece. There was even a section on having fun in Athens in the 1850s. So we had beautiful 19th century dresses of ladies going around the royal garden or doing their shopping for toys, for clothes in a smart Athenian street. All these were reconstructed within the exhibition space. Photographs of Greeks from all places, either wearing their everyday clothes or their fineries, constituted a special section just to get to know the Greeks of the period. And here, a special section drawn from the private collection of Dionysius Fotopoulos examined the move from the fustanella, the white skirts, and also the baggy trousers, the vraka, which Greeks traditionally wore, into European dress. Tails, coats, trousers, Western fashions. And this was a slow move that was completed by the early 20th century. Now, we left Otto weeping on his way out from Greece. His replacement came from Denmark. Young Prince Christian was renamed King George I, and he arrived in Greece, and he brought with him as a gift from the British the Ionian Islands. And this is the body of members of parliament from the Ionian Islands that joined the Greek parliament. George married a beautiful Russian princess, Olga. And Olga, the new queen of Greece, was Orthodox, very important for the integration of the dynasty into Greek reality. On the other side, on the other end of the social spectrum, opposite the royals, were the bandits. Bandits who were the Wild West figures of Greek reality until the 20th century, and they represented the independent spirit that lived on in the new country. But the country was pushing forward. New public works and, of course, extended educational institutions were building a modern state. And we see here an architectural drawing of a practicing Greek man, architect, and also a sampler, an embroidery done by a young girl in 1878 by a certain Maria Cardizzi. So girls are also being educated and admitted to schools. I mentioned already that most Greeks lived outside Greece, and this painting records the tragic events of the Cretan uprising, as the Cretans wanted to join Greece, and the massacres that followed. We all know that this was resolved, and by the early 20th century, Crete became part of Greece. As the exhibition drew to its end, so we delved into its importance for future generations and how it remained a very important landmark in the identity and self-definition of the Greeks. In this photograph, we see the granddaughter of the famous Rosa Botsari, probably the most beautiful Greek of the reign of Otto. The girl in the 1920s, 100 years later, is dressed in her grandmother's clothes. So a very touching connection, and showing how much the Greeks, even now, 200 years later, identify and connect with the people that made Greece free. And of course, artists play a major role in this, and this is a stunning contemporary print showing one of the fighters of the revolution. The conclusion of the exhibition focused on an event that happened towards the end of the 19th century, and that was the opening of the Corinth Canal. The Corinth Canal was a major public work that symbolized the coming of modern Greece. A few years earlier, the Suez Canal had been opened by the French, and it was now navigated by the British. But in the case of Greece, this canal was opened by Greeks. It was engineered by the Greeks. And we had the sole running of it. So that was a source of great national pride. And we gathered in this section 3 huge paintings by Volanakis, one from the Bank of Greece, the other from the National Bank, and the other from Alpha Bank. And they all showed the same event, the opening of the Corinth Canal. And they were by the same painter, but they had never been united before. So working with the 3 banks, we were able to bring them together and give a stereoscopic impression of this event. Our farewell to our visitors was dedicated to the musical score of the national anthem, which forms part of the Benaki Museum collection. Here o here eleftheria, hail, O hail, liberty. And we placed that in a room which was a sort of 360 degrees video projection summing up the story that had been narrated over 3,000 square meters. Now, that was a very blitzkrieg walk through the exhibition. But if you want to relive it, you have to go actually and get the catalog, which is this huge brick of a volume, 1,218 pages, that kind of give you the spectacle that we try to recreate within the section. And for the first 2 months of the exhibition, this was the only thing that one could see. It was very touching to have a lot of people queuing outside the museum because shops could only sell outside. You couldn't come in the museum. Before the exhibition was even open, queuing to get a copy of the catalog, at least have something to read at home. And the shop worked very well for a period, and we had very good sales online because people wanted to have something connecting to the 200 years of the revolution. And very, very few people could see it. Here, we have the President of the Republic, who, being the President, could visit before the opening of the exhibition and made a statement to support it. That was a difficult moment because only 6 people could be in her company. And once the exhibition opened, we had a lot of VIP visitors coming over. Here I am with the American ambassador at the time, Jeffrey Pyatt, who came to visit. But the most glamorous of our VIP visitors was, of course, Brigitte Macron, the wife of the French president, who was brought by Mrs. Mitsotakis, the wife of the Greek prime minister, to the exhibition. And she said the 2 words that I will never forget out of all the VIPs. She was going around the exhibition and she only had 40 minutes. And of course, 40 minutes was nothing for such a show. So when her people came and said, well, you know, you're now being expected, we have to go, you have to change for the dinner at the president's mansion, she replied, she said, I won't change because now je regarde et j'écoute. I'm looking and I'm hearing. So I'm not going to change. So that was a very important moment for us. And in the end, we offered her a small silver ring, probably the cheapest thing in the whole shop of the exhibition, which had a little owl on it. She had told us that her husband loved owls. And of course, it wasn't just VIPs that came. Children were a particular favorite, and our young friend here came every day to the exhibition, and he painted almost every work of art in it. A very talented young painter, he became a staple, a furniture. Through the summer, when his school was closed, his parents would bring him every day, and he would sit and painted. He created a wonderful album of his own paintings of 1821, before and after. Works of art from the exhibition spilled into the streets of Athens. And here is the window of the biggest department store, Attica, in Athens, where a performance happened for a few days through the summer using images from the exhibition. One final question that people asked: how did COVID affect the exhibition in terms of attendance? And I will have to say quite a lot. After the 14th of May, 2021, when the exhibition opened, people were reluctant to go into closed spaces. Of course, museums were very safe, we followed all the measures, but it really took off after September, when people returned from their summer holidays, and you can see the lines just hitting huge peaks. On the last day, the 7th of November, we had 2,700 visitors, which by Greek standard is just phenomenal. And they were people coming in at 11 o'clock in the evening. And we said, we close at midnight, we can't keep it any longer. But they said, please, please let us go in. If you want to relive it, go to the Benaki website, benaki.org, click on the main menu and Tribute to 1821. There we have gathered 360-degree virtual video tours that really give you the impression that you are within the exhibition. Special videos on it, and also a wonderful making of video, which was aired at Greek national television, and which takes you behind the scenes, much more than I did, and shows you how the whole thing happened. And if you find yourselves in Athens, come to the main Benaki. On the 3rd floor, we have created a very small version of this exhibition, covering, of course, going down to World War II, but we have used our experiences and our knowledge gathered during the 5 years of preparation. And we created a new exhibition on modern Greece. And it will bring to mind, it will remind you the things I have covered tonight. It opened a year ago exactly, on the 25th of March, 2024. And here with the then President of the Republic and the current President of the Republic, we're looking through it. And I hope we'll have the opportunity to welcome you and relive again the legacy of the revolution. Thank you.
Well, Georgi, I mean, what can I say? We can only echo the words of Brigitte Macron, je regarde et j'écoute, and we can keep listening to you. I mean, listening, to this wonderful story, Spellbound. I feel that your talk has been so insightful and thought-provoking. We truly thank you for sharing with us your expertise, your knowledge, your time. I am sure that there will be many questions. Anastasia, I have taken many notes, but if you have some questions.
I just wanted to echo Brigitte Macron aussi and say that, it was a fascinating journey. We were listening, we saw the whole history of the Greek Revolution each year throughout, modern, like the 20th century, basically, through the art, through very, very sensitive and rich and textured presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Mangini. This was like amazing. I'm sure the audience stayed with us, although we're a little over time. They stayed there captivating. Yes, they're all there. And I think the information at the end was also very helpful. We can go and visit. I wanted to say that I was in Athens this August, actually, and we did visit the third floor, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. It was everything in a more compact form. It was magnificent. Thank you so much, for this presentation and for putting together such an important exhibit. I hope that perhaps, not before long, we could be able to bring some of it here in Chicago. And we have spaces, and it's an important thing for the Greeks of diaspora to also be able to experience. And I think, showing at least part of this outside the Greek space over here will acquire a special resonance. So I think, I look forward to perhaps making plans about this and talking more concretely when we come to Greece again in the summer, and hopefully when we visit again this amazing museum. Yeah. So let's give some time to the audience to ask questions if we have any in the chat. I'm sure
Yes, I
they're
can.
equally fascinating. They are like, spellbound right now, Calliope, as you said.
Exactly.
Or completely bowled over.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Ήταν φανταστική η παρουσίαση. Εγώ δηλαδή καθόμουν και έβλεπα και παρακολουθούσα και λέω εντάξει, ας μην τελειώσει. Ήταν πάρα πολύ
I
ωραία.
could be here for 2 more hours. I know that Professor Bien raised his hand, and
Hand.
I am trying to see exactly how I could give him permission to speak.
Uh-huh.
Now
Yes, I cannot see him anymore.
I cannot
So
see
perhaps
him
he
anymore.
wanted to say.
Maybe he wanted to say
goodbye.
yes, that he was about to leave.
Yeah.
I see that here in the Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, glory to Greece.
Thank you.
I
Thank
see a
you.
compliment here.
Uh-huh.
Thank you very much.
There are 2 different ways to share your comments. You can either enter your comment in the chat, or you can also raise your hand, and then I can give you permission to speak, and then you can ask your question. I feel that it's a rare opportunity, the one that we have here, to host Dr. Manginis, and since he is so generous with his expertise, I feel that we can ask him some questions that we might have.
But you can always write as well if you wish to. You can,
Absolutely.
through the ladies of Chicago. I will be happy to answer. Oh, there we are. There is a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Why did the Greeks import a king from Germany and later from Denmark? This question by Azade Medalia. Hopefully I am pronouncing the name correctly.
Thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. Remember when we talked about the Battle of Navarino, and I showed this cartoon showing the Greeks being very grateful to the 3 great powers, the British at the center, the Russians, and the French. These 3 great powers became sort of saying the guarantee powers for the existence of the Greek state. And there was between them an agreement that especially after the assassination of Capodistria, that the new king could not be, Greece was decided that needed a king, but there was no royal line in Greece. There was no aristocracy. We have to go back to the early 19th century when kings were kind of special creatures, and they bred between them, and there were very, very few royal houses around. So it was decided by the 3 great powers that none of the British, French, or Russian royals would be involved in Greece. So they had to find a royal from another royal house. And of course, Germany has been the breeding ground of royals to this day, really, around Europe. So the second son of the king of Bavaria, Ludwig I, Otto, was chosen to be the first king. Now, after Otto was ousted, the second king was chosen from the Glücksburg dynasty of Denmark. But he was much more connected, the Glücksburg and George, Prince Christian as he was much more connected to the British royal house, because by then the British exerted much greater influence on Greek affairs. So he actually he went to London before he arrived in Athens to take the blessing of Queen Victoria, and then came down. That's a very little known fact. So it was all a question of international balance of power between the different great powers, the currency powers of Greece, but also the royal houses and the politics that these houses represented. And there's another question.
And in the end, if I may follow up on that, so the Greeks had voted for a constitution on nomos tis epidavru. So there was a constitution of the revolutionary state, which actually, as you mentioned, and it was great, like abolished slavery in one of its very first articles. It was the first European constitution to abolish slavery. And but that constitution was never put to action, not until 1843, which is after, Greeks demanding that some form of constitution was recognized. So it was a form of patronage, dear George, in a way. It was a form of patronage, like a little payoff for the help that the great powers offered. It was not for free. It was,
Now, there are some more. Can I read the questions? Because I can actually see them, so I'll do it quickly. So what historical fact that you discovered do you think would be most surprising to Greeks who think they already know this history? By Candice. Now, I mean, I didn't do the scholarly work. The curators of the exhibition did, and they worked with other historians and also curators. So I cannot really answer that, but I can tell you one thing that the exhibition did, and the curators of the exhibition, Tasos Sakelaropoulos and Maria Dimitriadou did, which to me was very clever and very subtle, and we followed in the new exhibition at the museum, the permanent exhibition that we did on the third floor. They placed the seminal painting of the revolution, which is the declaration of the revolution in 25th of March, 1821 in Agia Lavra. The one I showed you of Rizakis and the Bishop of Patras, of Old Patras, blessing the flag, etc. They didn't place it where usually you would place it, at the beginning of the story, in March 1821. They placed it in Otto's reign, because this is when all these images of the revolution were created. These myths, grounded in reality, but not reality, really. They were these potent symbols. So they placed this seminal image in its symbolic context as the constitution of a Greek way of looking at things, of a modern Greek mythology, rather than when traditionally it was placed. So to me, that was a very subtle historical way of showing the distance between truth and public perception. So, and that to me was a joy to see within a mainstream exhibition, because that was a mainstream exhibition. Now, Spiros Orphanos asked, what was not included for whatever reason if money was no object in the exhibition? So first of all, money is always an object. There's always limitations, but there's a lot of things that we couldn't possibly bring. First of all, we asked for loans from Greek institutions, which were not given because all the different museums of Greece and foundations were planning for their own exhibitions. Some of them did, but others sadly could not because of the pandemic. So the National Historical Museum did a wonderful touring exhibition on board a ship that went to all the Greek islands. That was a great idea. But so there were a few things that we couldn't get because exhibitions were planned elsewhere. And I already said that the Capodistria portrait, the original, could not have arrived from, was not given by the Royal Collection. But otherwise, I think we managed pretty much everything. We got everything we wanted, and we are very grateful to all the lenders for this, especially private collectors who share things out of their own collections, and that the public cannot see. And also, Christina Colandoni is asking, how or why was the Hymn to Liberty by Solomos and Nicolaus Manzar chosen as the national anthem, given the Italian-Greek identity? Now that, I have to admit, I don't know. I know that the Solomos poem was very popular from the moment it was written. So it appeared not just, it was written in Italian, appeared in Greek, and it was translated in several European languages quickly during the revolution. So it became a sort of symbol of the Greek war for independence quite early on, as the revolution was unfolding. So that kind of explains why. And then, quite a few years later, Manzaros set it to music. And there's various versions of the Hymn to Liberty. The one we've got at the Benaki is the second version, and there's a third as well. So, but now Solomos, the very fact that Solomos turned into Greek poetry, started writing Greek for this particular poem, I think in itself made it so touching and so special that it exists, marked something so special. But I don't know how it came to become the national anthem. Oh, Mrs. Giannakidou, you're muted.
Yeah, I was saying me neither. I don't know how. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Christina, we will have to look into it.
Yeah. And we will update all of you with the answer. Yeah. Maybe there was a competition or maybe not. Yeah. No. But do you, George, do you know if the music came before it became an anthem, or as it was decided that it will become the national anthem?
I think it was written as a national anthem, the music.
Yeah. It is a hymn to liberty.
Yes. It was because you can see it's written on the score. It was offered to King Otto by Manzaros, it was. But, it's a good question, actually, when it comes.
Yeah. And it is the ode to freedom. So there's something about it. It's not about Greece per se, but it is about freedom, the liberation of Greece through this freedom. And, maybe it was appealing.
It was a very difficult time in European politics, the 1820s. There was a reactionary movement. And we have to look at what happened in Greece through also the lens of reaction to this reaction. It was a reactionary movement against what was seen as the offspring of the French Revolution and Napoleon's campaigns. And then there was a counter movement to that. The fact that a lot of the Philhellenes who came to fight for the Greeks in two waves, one very early on and one a bit later. A lot of them were professional soldiers, And many of them were political radicals that were doing the rounds in revolutions in South America and then in Europe. So all these were things that were touched upon in the exhibition, but we couldn't really, even in 1,200 objects, we really could not exhaust all the different stories.
Right. And national revolutions were the radical thing to do back then, because they, nations were emerging from empires. So that's why, like I framed it at the very beginning in terms of anti-colonial rule, in a way, that's what, this was in many spaces, the smaller nations asserting themselves against the empire. And it was, of course, no accident that the Metternich, famously from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the prime minister, was very much against the Greek Revolution, as were, initially many imperial houses of Europe. Yeah.
Yes, it's a wonderful coincidence that I showed the Capodistria portrait, which sits in Windsor. In Windsor, in the gallery where it is, the wonderful Waterloo chamber, his portrait is next to Metternich's.
Yes.
And it's so ironic that the two the two people, the most ardent Greek and the greatest enemy of Greek independence, they just sit next to each other.
Which is very interesting and, thought-provoking.
And they emerged into this new world order that was created after Napoleon. And both of them fought somehow against Napoleon. Metternich wanted to dissolve France. Capodistria wanted to keep France together. So these were great times for international politics, and the Greek Revolution happened at this wonderful time. But as a historian was saying a few days back, it's the greatest thing the Greeks ever did, that we managed to pull it through.
Yeah.
It happened. It was an incredible thing that it happened, and we should all be incredibly proud and grateful.
Right. The modern Greeks, we should say, because the ancient Greeks, they defeated the Persians, right? That was, a long time ago. But for the modern Greeks, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was such an important foundational event. Absolutely.
So I see no more questions.
Yeah, very good. Yeah,
Thank
and I'm
you.
sure people, we went a little over time, but it was very exciting and it was fascinating, and we're very thankful, Dr. Manginis. Thank you very much.
Thank you for everything.